My name is Miriam Flores, and this is my husband, Andy. We've been married for almost 14 years, and we've been members of St. Francis of Assisi since 2004. We have 4 wonderful children, Gabby, Alyssa, Mariah, and Jackson.
Our son Jackson, who is 2.5, can take my iPhone and the iPad and navigate to his favorite app, Disney Junior, and turn on his favorite show, PJ Masks, without fail every time. Apple calls this intuitive design, a product so easy to use you don't need a manual or instructions on how to use it. Some people think marriage is an intuitive design, so easy to execute that no manual is required. Anyone who has been married for longer than 6 weeks knows this is simply not true.
Our lives are full of the intuitive design concept. You turn on a new computer, microwave, phone, anything really, and it's ready to go. If you run into issues along the way, you're just a Google search away from knowing how to resolve your issue. Marriage is no different, or is it? You can certainly Google answers to the problems that arise in your marriage as well, but how do you know you're getting the right response? While the internet has plenty of answers and information on any and every topic, you always have to wonder how credible the source is. And with something as treasured as your marriage, wouldn't you want to make sure you're going to the best source of all, the creator of marriage himself?
God provided us with our spouse and our marriage. God gave us instructions in the Bible, complete with examples on how to live our daily lives and how to achieve a loving, caring, long-lasting, and fruitful relationship. In the Bible, He also gave us instructions on what He intended marriage to be for us and what's required of us to maintain it. And that's what we're here to talk about, the biblical concept of marriage. Some examples of God's instructions for us and our marriage in His Word.
Marriage is a complicated endeavor. You take 2 very distinct individuals, each with their own personalities, interests, and life experiences. You add a little love into the mix and expect to go forward and live happily ever after. But it's not always that easy. Early in our marriage, we realized how different our interests were. In the evenings, Andy liked to spend hours after work unwinding by playing video games. I had been alone in an apartment for most of the day and wanted to spend time with my husband, so I would spend hours watching Andy play video games. It was awful.
Awesome.
Awful.
Awesome.
It really was awful.
This obviously led to a discussion of how we should spend our evenings together, limiting video game time, and realizing that we didn't have to do everything together.
We had to realize that even though in marriage we became one, we had different interests, and even that men and women experience life differently. I enjoy a night out, surrounded by friends and engaging in endless conversations. Andy's ideal evening would be a quiet one in front of the TV. We process differently. I can't tell you how many times we've been a part of the same conversation and we each walk away with a completely different experience of what had happened. I know that I'm a talker and Andy just isn't. When we have a conversation, I want to know the details and have some background information, while he just wants the facts. I explained to Andy that I wanted to spend time with him in the evening and that it was important to me to hear about his day. It took him a while to learn that I wanted to hear more than good when I asked about his day at work.
When you think about it, only God could have come up with the idea of marriage and a plan to make it work. And that plan for true marital happiness is laid out in the Bible, God's blueprint for marriage. God understood our need for a role model in the area of marriage, so He didn't just give instructions about marriage, He provided something far more significant. He infused marriage with meaning by getting married Himself. In the Old Testament, God continually refers to Himself as a husband to His people, Israel. And in the New Testament, the church is elevated as the bride of Christ. God is married, and He has been faithful to His church despite continual rejection. The sacrament of marriage was so important to Jesus that He used the wedding at Cana as the setting where He performed the first of His miracles. It is God's marriage that can infuse our marriages with significance and meaning. No matter what our circumstances, God desires that our earthly marriage be a reflection of Him and His love for us. So what does God intend for our marriages?
In the book of Genesis, God realized that man, even though he had total intimacy with God in the Garden of Eden, was alone and needed companionship. And so, God took one of man's ribs, and from it created woman. And then the man said, "This is now bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman, for she was taken out of man." And Scripture goes on to say, "And for this reason, man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and they will become one flesh." The principle of leaving and cleaving. And in the Gospel of Matthew, Jesus adds, "So they are no longer two, but one. Therefore, what God has joined together, let man not separate." When we got married, I was very excited about the concept of leaving and cleaving, because I expected it to mean that Andy would leave his parents and cleave to me and my family in my hometown of Houston. It was a difficult adjustment for me to move to San Antonio just 6 months after our wedding. But looking back, I know that it was a true blessing to our marriage to have a little space to be able to figure out what becoming one truly means.
Leaving and cleaving wasn't a difficult concept for me. I'd already spent years away from my parents' home, and I knew that Miriam and I were very different people from my parents. My parents, who just celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary, have very defined roles for each of them. My dad raised 3 kids, but has probably still never changed a diaper. My dad brings in the income, takes care of all the home repairs, and handled the major discipline issues. My mom cooks, keeps the house, and handles the day-to-day childcare events. For Miriam and I, we have much more balanced roles in marriage. I have changed plenty of diapers. Both of us are ready to leave and cleave. We just had to work on the becoming one part. For each couple, the leaving and cleaving process is unique. For many of us, it wasn't leaving our parents' home, but it may have been leaving single life and that independent lifestyle. How many of us as young married couples struggled with the feeling of being caught between pleasing our mother or pleasing our spouse? But what about now? What things do we, as married couples, have a tendency to be more devoted to than our spouse? When God spoke in these terms of leaving, he was referring to abandoning anything that might jeopardize our commitment of marriage to each other as husbands and wives.
When we look at this concept, we had to stop and ask ourselves, what things were we giving more attention to than each other? With 4 young children and busy careers, it's easy to let all of the busyness of life take the majority of my energy and attention. Our schedule is beyond full, with a mix of 17 dance classes a week, carpools to and from school, a toddler who I chase around, elementary faith formation to coordinate, middle school faith formation to teach, adult faith formation to attend, and participating in our small church community. We've tried to not give up hope of finding time to exercise every once in a while, too.
Oh, and don't forget that I work 8 to 5, or 6 or 7, and you work evenings and weekends. So we often have a messy handoff of kids, cars, and instructions for how to finish dinner or what homework needs to be done. We are all too aware of how easily we can begin to feel disconnected in our marriage if we don't make a conscious effort to set distractions aside and spend time together to continue to grow in our relationship.
We understand now that leaving and cleaving, as God speaks of it in Genesis, wasn't a one-time act. It's a choice that we must continue to make. We haven't decided to cut out all activities from our lives. We've just made it a point to stay connected with each other and not to let anything distract us from focusing on our marriage. So take a moment now to consider these questions. Is there anything that I need to leave and cleave to be 100% dedicated to our marriage? How do we balance life's obligations with living out our vocation? How much dedicated time do you spend together with your spouse? How can you increase the quality or quantity of time?
We do have a healthy marriage, but even the happiest couples get a little frustrated with each other from time to time. In the New Testament, God, through his disciple Paul, has a few things to say on the topic of anger and how it applies to marriage. He reminds us not to let the sun go down while you are still angry, or as Miriam understands it, wait until we're in bed to admit that you're mad, and then not let your husband go to sleep until the issue is settled. I was okay with this pattern as I carefully considered my answers and selected the one that would help me get to sleep the quickest, or so I thought. I'm sorry was a good start, but having to know what I was sorry for was the part that made me sit up and really participate in the discussion. We've had many nights of long conversations, which improved our communication, helped us understand one another, and when we were assured, we had many long nights of conversation, which improved our communication, helped us understand one another, and helped us learn about our expectations for another. So while the sun may have gone down while we were angry, we were assured it wouldn't come up without the issue being resolved. Although the first few times it got a little close. God knew that the problem solving in marriage should come quickly, without the chance for anger to fester, for the ugly thoughts of getting even to deepen, or to find more ways to put each other down, and to not reconcile quickly. God wants our relationship with each other to be the same as his relationship with the church. He doesn't want it to be interrupted by pride-filled arguing and unresolved anger.
For Andy and me, and hopefully for you too, one of the most important aspects of marriage is respectful communication. The New Testament is full of verses that can apply, especially for husbands and wives, on the issue of just talking nicely to each other. Paul, again in Ephesians, says something very profound. He urges the Ephesians to let no unwholesome word proceed from your mouth, but only such a word as is good for edification, according to the need of the moment, that it may give grace to those who hear. That's right. Our words should build the other up, not tear them down. We can't let our emotions control our vocabulary, because a few hurtful words can leave a very long-lasting mark. We are usually pretty good about respectful communication, but every once in a while, I catch Andy saying the first words that come to mind. It usually goes like this. Hey honey, we need to sit down and work on our Beyond Cana talk.
You need to work on your
What did you say?
I said I love you.
No, you didn't.
You're
What?
right. I did say that I would love to work on our wonderful talk with my lovely bride.
That's what I thought you said.
I have come to learn that my mumble is my mouth's way of helping me out when it knows those words should not pass my lips. The automatic I love you is my brain stalling for time to come up with the right answer. This pattern is painfully obvious to Miriam, but she tolerates it knowing that my final answer is what I really want to say.
Andy and I communicate very openly, and over the years have learned to voice our disappointments and frustrations without compromising our respect or the other's dignity. Paul purposely talks about using words that are appropriate to the need of the moment, meaning that it's not always necessary to bring up the past. As you recall, God brings up history throughout the Bible to remind us of his unfailing provision and love toward us, not to guilt us or condemn us. And we can model our communication after God's example. Bringing up old arguments or failures in a fight only serves to prove that the history hasn't been forgotten and shows that the issue was never truly resolved to begin with. I may be known for not ending a discussion until deep into the night, but that's because we're making sure that we have truly resolved the issue that caused the tension so we can put it behind us, forgive one another, and move on without worrying about it resurfacing in the future as fuel for a new argument. Paul also tells us to use words that are uplifting, that give grace to those who hear, and to edify one another through our speech. It's not enough to only avoid angry words, but we also need to be aware of how we can help build up our spouse by the words that we use. I know that Andy appreciates what I do for him and our children because he tells me so frequently. We have a pretty good habit of texting each other once or twice a day. Most days our messages are short and just to say, I love you, or don't forget to pick up the kids. But every once in a while, he'll send me a message that not only builds me up, but also fills me with grace. Andy always seems to know just when I've had too many long days with a toddler, or a particularly rough homework session with one of the girls, and he'll send me a message that expresses deep gratitude for my work for our family. He always remembers to throw in that I'm beautiful and that he can't wait to be there with me. His words of support are just enough to get me through the rest of the day. Texting doesn't replace our face-to-face conversations, but it's a nice way for us to stay connected. It's a good way to send a compliment and a word of support. I've been known to go back and read those texts over and over again.
And St. Paul tells us in Ephesians 5:25, "Husbands, love your wives, just as Christ loved the church and gave his life for it." God compares our responsibility and our desire as husbands to love our wives to Christ's love for his bride, the church. There is no pride in that kind of love, only the greatest of responsibilities. He tells me here that since God himself gave Miriam to me in marriage, and he blessed our marriage, that he has put her in my care. I have often told myself that if Miriam were in physical danger, I'd certainly take a bullet for her. I truly believe that I would sacrifice my life for her. Yet, when Miriam needs help finishing dinner, chasing down Jackson, or mediating sibling drama, I have trouble pulling myself away from the Spurs game. If I would give my life for my wife, I should certainly be able to turn off the TV, even if it's the playoffs. Of course, she would never ask me to turn off a playoff game, but if she did, I would. That's not exactly the way Christ cares for his wife, but it's a pretty close attempt. I have the responsibility to try, even when I'm the most angry or distracted, to show Christ's kind of love. And that means being able to put anything aside for my wife's sake. It's at these times when I'd rather be selfish that I need to remember why we got married to begin with and how I felt about Miriam then. And it helps to remember that God himself provided surefire ways in his word to keep a marriage on track. It brings us back to where we want to be in the first place. There are dozens of places in Scripture where the Lord speaks of marriage, and when you attend weddings you hear many of them. Remember the 1 Corinthians passage where Paul speaks of love being patient, kind, the love that does not envy and it does not boast, the love that always protects, always trusts, and always hopes, and always perseveres.